So I was intending to do a video about my own circumstances with regard to Patreon before the Lauren Southern situation blew up. So instead of doing two videos, I'll combine them both here. Now, if you want to know the full details of Lauren Southern's Patreon being shut down, go over and check out Lauren's video. It's about 7.5 minutes long, but I'm just going to play you the relevant part of that video regarding Patreon's letter to Lauren explaining the reason why they removed her Patreon page.
Here at Patreon, we believe in freedom of speech. We are creating a platform that empowers creators to share and debate ideas. When ideas cross into action, though, we sometimes must take a closer look at what our creators are doing with the funds they earn through Patreon. It appears that you are currently raising funds in order to take part in activities that are likely to cause loss of life. We have therefore decided to remove your page from Patreon and paid out your final balance of $95 to you. We understand that this will come as a disappointment. Please know that we have come to this decision after a long review process and will not consider an appeal. Thank you for your understanding.
So that's a serious charge, raising funds to take part in activities that are likely to cause loss of life. But Patreon don't sound that confident about the accusation themselves by using the phrase, "It appears that you are." I mean, in this optical illusion, it appears that the horizontal lines are crooked, but they aren't. They're straight. Either Lauren Southern is raising funds in order to take part in activities that are likely to cause loss of life, or she isn't. In Patreon's community guidelines, they have a section that pertains to facilitating harmful or dangerous activity. We don't allow funds to be collected for organisations that promote, forums that distribute, or anything else that primarily facilitates harmful or dangerous activities. For example, an organisation that promotes sexual abuse, intellectual property violations, weapons, commercial spamming, self-harm, drug manufacturing techniques, or property crimes would be prohibited from receiving funds through Patreon. And fair enough, they don't want to support people raising funds for sex trafficking, for example. But notice it doesn't say we don't allow funds that appear to be collected for organisations that promote forums that distribute or anything else that primarily facilitates harmful or dangerous activities. So is Lauren Southern raising funds in order to take part in activities that are likely to cause loss of life? Well, according to Lauren, she isn't.
I assume that you guys are talking about the Defend Europe mission, a mission that, firstly, I am not actually taking part in. I was planning on joining them on the boat initially just to record everything, something that hundreds of journalists and reporters from all across the political spectrum were begging to do, but I decided a professional crew member with more experience should take my place instead. Secondly, not a dime that I got from Patreon went towards the Defend Europe mission. All of the money I get from Patreon goes towards my initial stated goals, which were entirely within the Patreon guidelines. And thirdly, and probably the most important point, even if I were taking part in the Defend Europe mission and I were raising money for it through Patreon, it is not a mission with any intentions to cause the loss of life. In fact, that is quite a slanderous statement because the intentions are the exact opposite. For those who don't know, Defend Europe is a mission which has three main goals. 1, fact-finding to expose the alleged collusion between NGOs and human traffickers. 2, to sink empty hazardous rafts so they can't be used by traffickers again, a task that NGOs should be doing. And 3, to answer distress calls and provide aid to migrants who need it and call the closest port for aid instead of transporting people to the furthest point in Europe, which the Italian government are asking the NGOs to stop doing. The mission is literally working entirely within maritime laws, and if any of that changed, and if their mission was to harm people or to ignore people in distress, I would disavow it immediately.
But of course, whether you believe Lauren or not, you can always just say, well, Patreon's a private company and they can do whatever they like. And that's true, and I totally understand and respect a private company's ability to do that. But the problem is that the terms of service, which include community guidelines, are often very subjective. YouTube creators know this better than anyone. Here's Patreon's policy on bullying, harassment, threats, and hate speech. Patreon should feel like a safe place for normal people. Normal people. Yeah, okay. We don't allow bullying or harassment on Patreon. At the same time, we want people to be able to express themselves, be critical, and discuss controversial issues. We recognise that discussing celebrities, media, or other public figures can sometimes involve harsh criticism, and we believe that is an appropriate part of free debate. That said, There is no room on Patreon for hate speech or serious threats of violence. For us, hate speech includes serious attacks on people based on their race, ethnicity, national origin, religion, sex, gender, sexual orientation, age, disability, or serious medical condition. So Patreon has a more lenient stance on criticising celebrities than YouTube does, but they also include the nebulous term hate speech. And as we know by now, one person's hate speech is another person's satire or criticism or just plain simple disagreement. Hate speech becomes completely subjective. Yes, Patreon qualifies it by saying serious attacks, but what's a serious attack in the age of snowflakery? What if I use Patreon to fund a screening of the Red Pill? There are certain people who think that is a serious threat to people's safety. In this case, the women's. In fact, that was the exact reason given for shutting down the initial screening of the Red Pill at Sydney University earlier this year. And as we know, the burden of proof usually lies with the alleged victim. If I feel it's hate speech, or I feel I'm being threatened, then I am. That's usually how these things work. Now, I don't want to overstate things. I think most people in the so-called skeptic community aren't under any immediate threat of having their Patreon account removed, but it does create some uncertainty. One of the main reasons people set up Patreon accounts is because YouTube has become a less reliable source of income for content creators, especially since the adpocalypse. Last week, some YouTube content creators filed a class action lawsuit against YouTube. One of the channels was Zombie Go Boom, which has over 1.6 million subscribers, and we're bringing in between $10,000 to $15,000 a month in ad revenue. After adpocalypse, their revenue fell 90 to 95%, which means they're now earning between $500 and $1,500 a month. And this brings me to part of the reason I was going to make a video on YouTube and Patreon anyway. Here's a graph I've shown before, updated through July 22nd. This is revenue per 1,000 watch minutes. And as you can see, it's recovered since the worst of the adpocalypse in April, but it's still down approximately 50% since March, the last pre-adpocalypse month. And that's been fairly consistent now for 3 months. Down about 50% appears to be the new normal for me. And that's why Patreon is extremely important, so creators can diversify their revenue stream and be less reliant on YouTube. Now, the day after Lauren Southern posted her video, I had 3 people delete their pledges on my Patreon page. Now, it's not unusual for people to delete pledges. It happens all the time for different reasons. But I've never had 3 in one day before. And 2 of them even said in the exit survey that it was because of the Lauren Southern incident. One also said they'd be happy to donate if I opened an account on another crowdfunding site. I also received private messages from people through YouTube and Facebook saying they were considering doing the same thing and asked if there was another way they could continue to contribute. I offered my PayPal, which one patron has already donated through directly. So I'll put the PayPal link on my channel homepage and I'll include it in the description box of all future videos. Now, another person mentioned a couple of other alternatives. One of them was Counterfund, which says it is built by and for the wider alt-right counterculture, which I don't really want to be associated with, and they take 20% of your donations. Another suggestion was Rootbox, but it seems to be for specific projects, such if you want to raise money for a documentary or something like that. So I'm open to other suggestions, but I don't intend to close down my Patreon, but I would like to offer an alternative for those who don't want to continue supporting via Patreon. And lastly, and the second part of the initial reason I was going to do a video on Patreon was because the rewards that I offer don't seem to be having any effect, and I suspect most people don't even care about them. In fact, my Patreon support started to stagnate around the time I started offering rewards. Now, that just might be coincidence. Maybe I hit my upper limit given my subscriber base, but the fact remains the vast majority of the patronage I receive came before I offered any rewards, and personally I don't think the rewards are that enticing. Now, that's probably not the best sales strategy, but I'm just trying to be honest here. I mean, access to exclusive content is a good idea, but I rarely produce any, and for good reason. I mean, something that's exclusive to patrons will only get seen by a tiny number of people, and the YouTube ad revenue will be measured in cents, not dollars. It's not a good decision to spend 8 to 10 hours on a video and not get paid for it. And that might be okay for large channels that can afford to do it, but I can't given what YouTube is paying out at the moment. I guess I could offer it exclusive to patrons and then make it public after a day or two, but sometimes timing is of the essence with certain videos, and I'm still not sure how many people are likely to be attracted by seeing a video a couple of days before everybody else can. At the $2 level, I give a shout out once a month at the end of a video, but I don't like the fact that it excludes a bunch of people who generously donate $1 a month. Now, the $5 a month live stream may be more useful because the questions are driven by the patrons, but most people don't show up to the live stream and they end up watching it later like most non-patrons do. So I'm not convinced that that's particularly good value either. So if you are a patron on any level, you can let me know your thoughts on rewards by completing a simple one-question poll over at Patreon. And if you have a more lengthy comment or suggestion, you can leave that there also. So if I do decide to do away with the rewards, here's what I'm proposing to do. I'll still give a shout out on one video a month, but it will be to all patrons regardless of how much you donate. And I'll still do a monthly live stream, but I'll source the questions from all patrons and just choose the most popular questions and make the live stream open to everyone. And I still intend to do some giveaways when I can get sustainably above the $500 mark. I have been above $500 before, but for the last few months, a number of pledges have been declined. So what I receive has been a little less than what you see on the screen. And I won't be making those changes until next month. So I will still be doing this month's $5 patron live stream this coming Sunday, 30th of July. Details will be in a post on Patreon. And remember, if you can't support the channel financially, spreading the word by sharing my videos on social media is also much appreciated. I'll see you next time.